Welcome back. Still tuned in to News and Views with myself, Salailo Makwidiri, on your home of humanitarian journalism, Salam Media. We'll be turning our attention back to South Africa. We'll be diving into what's becoming a very, very heated debate around South Africa's education system and the controversial call to raise the Matric pass mark to 50%. Many argue that the current system, which allows a pass mark as low as 30%, is setting our youth up for failure and perpetuating unemployment. And one of the loudest voices calling for reform is Build One South Africa, BOSA. This morning, I'm joined by their co-founder and deputy leader, Nobuntu Webster, to help us unpack the state of education in South Africa and her party's push for raising standards. Nobuntu, thank you so much for joining us. The idea of increasing the matric pass mark to 50% sounds like maybe an ambitious move, but is it the right solution for our struggling education system currently?
Thank you very much for having me on the show. So as a start, let's start off by saying that this isn't a foreign concept. Not only is it practiced in many countries around the world, but up until recently, that was the pass mark in our very own country. And so, already we're seeing the impact of the lowering of the standards and of the quality of education, because you look at the unemployment rates of young people. And yes, there are other factors, other economic factors that come into play, but certainly the employability of young people and the skills and even just the perceived quality of the matric certificate contributes to that. But also, you also have other impact, like the fact that the throughput rates at university and at technical colleges is so low, has a lot to do with the fact that we've allowed the standard to drop when it comes to our education.
I think it's quite interesting that we're having this conversation while the matric class of 2024 is currently writing their matric exams, and the challenges that they face, particularly in public schools, have been well documented. Existing challenges in the education system, such as the lack of textbooks, infrastructure issues, and also teacher shortages. Wouldn't raising the bar without addressing some of those fundamental problems be setting up our students up for failure? Why does BOSA believe that raising the pass mark would be the right approach in the current environment, and taking into consideration some of the shortfalls of our education system?
Well, we certainly have proposed more than just raising the pass mark. We called for a long time, as Buldwane say, for the replacing of the Minister of Education, and we've seen that done now. We have a new minister, and actually it's a minister that we have great confidence in as a party, Minister Siviwe Kwahube. But what we expect to see is an overhaul of the education system, which really has been in regression for the past 15 years. So we've given an array of reforms that need to happen to the education system. It's not just the pass mark. First of all, you have to make sure that you equip educators. And before you even equip them, you have to make sure that you have qualified educators, because there are many instances where you do not even have qualified educators in the system. There are people who are unqualified who've somehow been able to slip into the system. You have to make sure that you upskill educators. You have to make sure that you have resources and the facilities that are necessary in our schools. We've called for the introduction of an independent ombudsman who will really oversee and report to Parliament, not to the department, oversee the state and the quality of education, receive feedback and complaints from parents and learners in the education system. I mean, I won't go through all the 10 reforms that we've put on the table, but there are various reforms that we've put on the table. It's got to be a holistic reform of the system.
Let's touch a bit on the practical impact. How does BOSA envision schools, particularly in some of the impoverished and rural areas of South Africa, coping with this higher standard? And what are some of the immediate steps that could be implemented to support structures which are already in place for schools to meet this target?
So, like I've said, part of that is equipping educators. The most important is to make sure that you equip educators, to make sure that you have enough educators. And everyone will then talk about budget and how, we don't have the money to be able to resource all this. But I mean, for instance, we have been following a case and reported it to the public protector and are fighting an issue where there was 85 million rand that has been wasted in building a school called Maibuye Primary, which is not in use. So the issue of funding is really about making sure that there is integrity, efficiency, and good management of the funds as a start. But we've also spoken to the cutting of perks and redirecting of funds to prioritize education. So we have hundreds of millions that are spent, and close to 1 billion that's spent on ministers' housing, etc. Hundreds of millions spent on perks like blue light brigades. But so we've said redirect the perks to politicians towards education so that you're able to resource the reform of the education system, including the scrapping of the 30%.
Mm, mm, mm. South Africa already has a high dropout rate. It's a crisis that we've been failing to mitigate for quite a long time. And one of the main reasons of that is you have many students failing to even make it to Matric with already existing 30% pass mark. Wouldn't raising the pass mark to 50% potentially discourage more students, when it comes to completing their Matric? And what would be the plan around tackling the existing dropout crisis while still pushing for higher academic standards like BOSA is advocating for?
We certainly anticipate that this would be a phased-in approach, and that it's not something that would suddenly happen where you're saying next year the pass mark has now changed. And to address the issues that you're speaking of, whether or not this proposal to increase the pass mark to a minimum of 50% for all subjects was on the table, you do need to solve for that high dropout issue. And part of it is about making sure that foundationally you improve the standard of education. We have 8-year-olds in this country that are not able to read for meaning. And even I spoke earlier about the educators. When you find assessment of educators, you have educators who themselves are struggling in terms of the level at which they should be able to comprehend certain subjects in order to be able to teach. So the issue is foundational. You have to make sure that foundationally you are changing and improving the quality of education and giving young people the foundation that they need in order to be able to cope throughout the school system. And that means that early childhood development has to have a focus. We know that the Bella Bill has introduced mandatory grade R, and that's a step in the right direction, but also making sure that in that foundation phase, you are anchoring the education with the kind of tools and the kind of skills that young people will need throughout their education career.
Mm, mm, mm. Let's chat a bit about post education outcomes because there is a life after Matric. A higher pass mark, yes, may push students harder, but what about the broader structural issues such as youth unemployment? What's the plan when it comes to bridging the gap between improving educational outcomes and also ensuring job opportunities for those that have that have completed their Matric? Because at this point, you have young people that almost feel like Matric is useless. We went through the system for the past 12 years. Those that went to universities have, and those that didn't almost feel like it's a worthless piece of paper.
So first of all, let's talk about the fact that the low standards that we have given our young people, first of all, mean that there are many of them that don't make it into university and TVET colleges because we celebrate this over 80% pass rate, but the quality of the pass means that many young people are not able to get into university or into TVET colleges. So that's a start. So this actually addresses that very challenge that you're talking about. The second is to say that coupled with this, we have to make sure that the curriculum is aligned with the needs in the workplace. So we have a skills gap in this country, and it's not being adequately met by the curriculum in high school. So we have to make sure that we are building a curriculum that speaks to the needs that are in the workplace. We have, in our 10-point plan, also proposed that we scrap life orientation and replace it with a subject that will give young people, for instance, skills in design thinking, necessary skills for the world today. And that's part of what will plug the gap. When you have unemployment rate for young people by the expanded definition that is close to 70%. You can't only blame that on economic factors. You look at various reports, and there is definitely an issue there where the young people who are school leavers, really are not adequately set up to work or for the workplace. And like I said, what this does with the low quality pass mark is that it reduces the perceived quality of a matric education.
Someone will say, well, whatever you're saying, it's all good and well. It looks very, very nice on paper, but the question is, where will we get the money? There's budgetary concerns within the basic education ministry. I think the minister Sivuyo Gwarube came out recently and highlighted that there's severe budgetary constraints, and the education sector is really, really in difficult times and has limited resources. When it comes to funding, the necessary interventions to support this higher pass mark, especially given the fiscal challenges, where do we get it? Where do we find the money in an already struggling department like the Department of Basic Education? All right, we seem to have lost Nobuntu, and I think that's going to be the overarching question, wouldn't be that we don't have the budget for it, don't have the money for it, and I would be really, really interested to find what would be her answer on that. But unfortunately, we have lost her. Hopefully, we'll be able to chat to her in the not so distant future. But we're going to leave it here for now. We'll see you after the short break.
We are here in the middle of a Zahra neighborhood. The whole neighborhood is already destroyed. More than 17 towers are down. Here, as you can see, the firefighters trying their best to help. The people are still under the rubble. A lot of the people.
Join Hamza on his exclusive South African tour as he shares his personal experiences, never before seen footage, and powerful insights on the ongoing genocide in Gaza. This is more than just a talk. It's an invitation to witness Gaza through the lens of Hamza Sha'alan. Don't miss this opportunity to meet the photojournalist who brought Gaza's pain and perseverance to the world in its darkest moments. Follow Salam Media on social media pages for more on this tour and be part of the conversation.